What's going on, everyone? Alex here, and I've been using the M1 MacBook Pro for about 6 months now, and I've made a few videos on it, but I've never actually done a full review on it. So here it is. This is my long-term review of the M1 MacBook Pro. Alright, so first things first, I just want to go over the specs of the laptop that I got. Obviously, it's the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, which came out towards the end of 2020. I went for the upgraded 16GB of RAM model, just to give me a bit more room in case I do need to use more powerful apps or anything like that. So I also went for the base model in terms of storage, 256 gigs. I decided on that because I added off these SSDs from SanDisk. Samsung T5s are also great. These 1TB SSDs are around €100, and to upgrade to only an extra 250 gigs of storage on the Apple website is an extra €200. So it just doesn't make sense to spend the money on extra storage. Also, a little side note, I got my laptop off the education store on Apple. I've actually made a video on it, so you can check out the details there. But basically, I'm not a student, and I was able to avail of the student offer where you get a bit of a discount on the Mac, and you can get discounted Pro apps as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Alright, so one of the main selling points of the new M1 Macs is the fact that it has the M1 chip. This is the first time that Apple have actually made their own chips for the laptops. Previously, they were using Intel chips. And basically what this means in layman's terms is everything is now more efficient because Apple control everything. They control the build, the software, and now the chipset. So everything is seamless, everything works really efficiently, everything is very battery efficient, everything is really fast. If you're using native apps like Safari, Final Cut Pro, they are super smooth and everything works really well. And then obviously, because everything works so well and efficiently, the battery life is just amazing. And just from using it for the past 6 months, I can say that it is actually super fast. The second you click an app, it opens up. There's no delay. The minute I want to do anything on Final Cut Pro, it does it straight away. There's no kind of buffering, so I'm not waiting around or anything like that. It's all instant and it's just really smooth, and yeah, it's a pleasure to use, to be honest. Next, I want to talk about the battery life. So this is another major selling point for the laptops, and they have an amazing battery life. So according to Apple's website, it has up to 20 hours of battery life, and yeah, that is pretty true. Like, it does have close to 24 hours. Obviously, it varies depending on what you're using, but in general, you very rarely have to charge it. And that just means that if you're going out for the day, you know you don't have to bring a charger, and you'll be able to do whatever you need on the laptop when you're on the go and not have to worry about it. And for me, I was recently just traveling, and so I was on airports, on boats, traveling around, and I think I wasn't using it too much, but I think I only had to charge it like 4 or 5 times over the 2 weeks that I was away, which is pretty cool for a laptop. So in terms of design, it's pretty much the same as it's been for the past 5 years or so, and yeah, I still think that it looks great, but yeah, I'd suspect that the next model are going to be a new design. Seeing as they changed the iMac, I reckon they'll kind of update the new, more powerful M1 Macs. But what do I know? Then just looking in more detail at the design, the trackpad, obviously Apple have the best in class trackpad. It's massive, so you have lots of room to play around with.
So much aerobics in here, so many activities.
It uses this force touch technology, which means it's not actually a physical click when you press on it. It just recognizes how hard you're pressing it, and it gives you like a haptic feedback of a click, but it's not actually a click. And basically what that means is you can use the whole trackpad the same everywhere, whereas on previous Macs it was kind of on a hinge, and the closer you pressed towards the keyboard, the less of a feedback you got, and it just wasn't as good as an experience as it is now. But yeah, there's lots of multi-touch gestures and all that. To be honest, this is the exact same as the trackpad on the MacBook Air, which I did another review on a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, a lot of the stuff is the same on these laptops, with a few differences that make this one a little bit more expensive. Next, I want to talk about the keyboard. So the M1 MacBook Pro has an amazing keyboard, and it's called the Magic Keyboard. Now, Apple got a lot of stick previously back in like 2016 when they came out with the butterfly keyboard, it was called. They wanted to go for a really slim design, and as a result, the typing experience just wasn't any good. The keys didn't really travel, so you didn't know if you'd pressed it or not. They got lots of dirt and stuff stuck in under them, so they'd break a lot, and yeah, there was just loads of problems with it. So they actually went back on themselves and introduced this new Magic Keyboard, which uses a scissor switch. And basically what it means is you have a really nice typing experience. It's really efficient, it's quite quiet, and yeah, it just is overall, it's just a good typing experience. Then just looking at the colours, so the MacBook Pro only comes in two colours, the classic silver and then the space grey, which is the one that I went for. Both look great, I just prefer the space grey, and yeah, not much to say on the colours, to be honest. Okay, so next I want to talk about the fans. Now, this is probably the main difference between the M1 MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. So the MacBook Pro actually does have fans that can actively cool the laptop, whereas the M1 MacBook Air has no fans. So if you really push the laptop using heavy programs or something like that, it has no way of cooling itself down, so you'll lose performance. Whereas on the M1 MacBook Pro, if you do push it, say you're editing like lots of 4K footage and the laptop gets really hot, the fans will kick in and be able to cool it down actively, meaning you won't lose performance. And that's the reason why I went for it, essentially. I didn't know if I would need it or not, but I'd rather have them and not need them than need them and not have them. And being honest, I don't think I've heard the fans kick in on my laptop. I use apps like Photoshop and Final Cut, which are supposed to be like quite heavy duty apps, but obviously I'm not using them to the full extent. And yeah, the laptop works perfectly, which is kind of a testament to the M1 chip and how efficient it is. But yeah, I just decided to get the Pro just in case using those apps did need the fans, but it turns out that they don't, which is obviously great news. So the laptop is super silent all the time. So just looking at the screen, Apple are still using the 13.3 inch Retina display, and to be honest, it's great. I can't really find much wrong with this laptop, as you can tell, but yeah, screen is really good. So it has a resolution of 2560 by 1600 and it has 227 pixels per inch. The screen can go up to 500 nits of brightness, which means you can use it outside in daylight and you'll be able to see the screen perfectly. Obviously in direct sunlight it'll suffer a bit, but 9 times out of 10 if you're sitting anywhere you'll be able to use the laptop outside. It also has 25% more colours than sRGB. I don't really know what that means, but I take it has a lot of colours, which means it can be very colour accurate if you're doing things like Photoshop, Lightroom, editing. And it also uses this thing called True Tone technology, which basically the screen will adjust to the surroundings. So if you're in a really dark room, it'll dim down the screen so it's not like blasting your eyes. And then equally, if you go into a really bright room, the screen will brighten up lots so you'll be able to see it. So basically you're getting the best version of the screen depending on your surroundings. Now, one thing I've read is to turn True Tone off if you are doing like color correction or anything like that, because it can kind of skew the colors and they may turn out different because the screen was adjusting when you didn't want it to. I'm not really an expert in that field, but yeah, I just read that, so thought I'd add it into the video. So let's talk about the microphone and cameras. So this is one of the main disappointments of the M1 Max, and they're still using the 720p FaceTime HD cameras that they've been using for the previous, I don't know how long, I think close to 10 years. And yeah, that's a bit of a disappointment, seeing as everyone's on FaceTime and Teams calls and Zoom calls and stuff like that. It would have been nice if they added in a better camera like they did on the new Mac, or on the new iMac. It's a 1080p camera, but yeah, it's a 720p camera. They claim that the M1 chip means it's a bit better quality, but still 720p, it's a bit annoying. They've also got a new studio quality 3-array mic system, and to be honest, it's pretty good. It works fine for video calls, but I would always recommend using some sort of external microphone when you're doing video calls and stuff like that, just because it cuts out all the background noise. Even plugging in headphones and using the microphone on that is better, I think, personally. Yeah, but yeah, you're perfectly fine to use the mics for your Zoom calls and stuff and you'll sound fine. Alright, so this is an example of the FaceTime HD camera on the MacBook Pro. As you can tell, it's not that bad, but it's not great. Definitely could be better. And also, this is an example of the microphones. I think they sound pretty good, but yeah, camera has a lot to improve. Also, the laptop has a 3.5mm headphone jack, for what it's worth. So next I want to talk about speakers, and to be honest, they're also really great. So they're studio speakers with a high dynamic range that can support Dolby Atmos playback, so that's really good. I actually don't have any speakers on my desk. I use the Mac itself and it works perfect for me. Obviously it doesn't get too loud, but the quality is really good. And it's kind of hard to show that on a YouTube video, so you're just going to have to take my word for it, but they are actually really good quality. Alright, now this is the biggest issue I have with my MacBook, and that is the touch bar. So at first I thought it was great, and I suppose that was just because of the novelty of it, but having used it for 6 months, I really don't like the touch bar. The main reason why I use the touch bar is to switch tracks on Spotify or something like that, turn up the brightness or volume, and turn the brightness up and down on the keyboard, the backlight on the keyboard. And just doing those is actually really annoying on the touch bar because you have to tap the little arrow, you have to look at where you're tapping, you can't just do it without looking at the screen. It obviously doesn't take that long, but it's just annoying, and I don't think it adds that much to the experience of using the Mac. So yeah, I would much rather the physical keys, like the ones on the MacBook Air. They just work, you know, a physical button just works. The ports. Now, this is one of the major issues with the M1 Macs, and the fact that they have only got 2 USB/Thunderbolt ports. Now, for 90% of people, that's just not enough. If you have a camera and you want to use an SD card, or if you have a monitor that uses HDMI, or if you want to plug in Ethernet to get really fast internet, you need to use an external dongle. And when you're paying like 1,500 euro for a laptop, that's a bit annoying. But yeah, it's just a reality. So yeah, you have to buy a dongle. I got a really cheap one on Amazon, and yeah, I'd recommend kind of going a bit higher, spending a bit more money, 50, 60, 70 euro on a dongle. That'll give you good speeds, because my ones just seems to be really slow, and it's also kind of dodgy. I read somewhere that they can be really damaging if you don't use a good one, so I'll definitely buy a new one. But yeah, you have to get a dongle. Overall, I would say this laptop is a really great purchase for me personally. It's been massive for me making these YouTube videos, editing photos, and even just day-to-day tasks. It's just good to use. Everything works really quickly. Nothing crashes. You're not waiting around for long. Battery life is amazing. There are obviously a few things that I would change, like the touch bar. I would get rid of that straight away and add in a function row, and I would add in extra ports and stuff like that. But that's the way with technology. There's never going to be a perfect product. Anyway, that's it for my review of the M1 MacBook Pro. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.